Hey everyone, so I've been drawing and painting portraits for about 20 years and teaching them to students. And so in this video, I'm going to teach you all how to actually sketch and shade a portrait so that it looks more accurate and visually interesting. And so in this video, I'm going to share with you three tips that I think are the most important for anyone that wants to get better at shading their portraits. So my first tip is to use your hatching and cross hatching to build up tone and value. And so value is basically like how dark or light the object or the person appears. And so the way that I do this is that instead of just only shading the eye and then moving on to the nose and doing it like feature by feature, I would suggest you try doing it all kind of all at once, right? So like gradually moving around the face until you're happy with it, because what that enables you to do is it enables you to look at each feature in relationship to other parts of the face as opposed to just doing, the entire eye itself and then the entire nose itself. So shading it more gradually is tends to be a better way of doing things. My second tip is to use your lines to show that the face is not flat. And so what I mean by that is that obviously if you think about your face, it's not flat. It's, your nose is on a different plane than your cheeks are, right? So when you're using your lines, what you can do is use your cross hatching and hatching to actually show that. So once you understand that concept, the question for people becomes how do you actually do that? And so one thing that you want to think about is that when you're showing like shadows and highlights and things like that, that's the way that light is actually hitting your face. So if you think about the way that the light is hitting your face, a lot of times the ball of the nose is lighter because the light is literally hitting the ball of the nose, and then the shaded parts, they're more in shadow like around the eyes. So whatever you're looking at, whether it's a photographic reference or if you're looking in the mirror and drawing, yourself as a self portrait, what you want to be doing is looking at how the light is hitting the face, and that's going to give you the guide of where to put the shadows, where to keep the midtones, put the midtones, and where to have your highlights. So if you look carefully at this guy that I'm drawing, you'll notice that the shadows are around the eyes, under the nose, and that kind of makes sense, right? Because the way that the light is hitting someone's face, it would cast a shadow around the eyes and under the nose, and then the top of the nose would tend to be lighter. Again, you can have different scenarios with lighting where you might have exceptions to this, but generally speaking, if you're just like looking at somebody, you're going to have this sort of similar type of lighting pattern. And so, that's what I'm looking at. Whenever I'm drawing from a photograph, I'm looking at where the dark parts are, where the shadows are, where the midtones, and where the highlights. And one thing that you can do, since it's your drawing, is you can accentuate some of those shadows and, midtones and things like that. So you can play around with how you want it to look for your own drawing. And so my third tip is to avoid over outlining things. And so if you notice in this drawing, there's very few times that I actually outline anything. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm using the gradual buildup of lines to shade the portrait. So what happens when you outline things is that it tends to flatten things out. And so if you outline your nose, for example, it'll actually do the opposite of what you're trying to do, right? Because you're trying to make it look more realistic and more 3D. And an outline will kind of like counteract that. So when you're building up your lines, you want to just think about how do you layer your lines instead to make it look the most three-dimensional. And so also in this one, just one extra thing before I end the video is that I decided at the end to build up some extra, contrast with red, right? And I chose that because, red and blue make purple. So I wanted the shadows to get a little bit deeper. And so a good way to do that actually is red. So it's kind of like not maybe the most obvious choice, but, getting some deeper values around the eyes, I thought it would look more interesting. And so play around with the colors that you use too. If you're drawing, you don't only have to limit yourself to black. A lot of times people, when they're doing pen, they're using only black, whether it's a micron pen. So I've been experimenting a little bit with Sharpies and, just trying different things with that. So be experimental with your drawing as well once you're getting past some of the basics. So let me know what you thought of this. If you'd like more portrait content, what are some of the things that you are struggling with your portraits? And I'll also link in the description to my playlist on portrait topics. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all soon. Bye.